Good afternoon, Howard Wiig, Code Green, ThinkTech Hawaii. I have as my guest today the Honorable Ryan Rutenschrouer. Rutenschroer, ancient German name. Ryan has more titles than we can almost count. He is a certified building operator for the Pacific Guardian Center, which is one of the, used to be Grosvenor Center downtown here in Honolulu. He's also co-chair for building operation and maintenance for the United States Green Building Council. He is the founder and president of Architecture for Healing, and he is a scholar at the University of Hawaii. And I think if we probed a little bit more, we could get some more titles. Ryan's passion is revolutionizing architecture. Very auspiciously, in yesterday's Sunday paper, there were two articles. One was the fact that the building department is now permitting studios as small as 250 square feet. And in fact, I had lunch with the manager of the building division, City and County of Honolulu. He said they are pushing, I imagine this will have to go through the council, pushing for spaces as little as 100 square feet. That's number one. Number two, my good friend Quester Lau finally made the paper. He has been pushing for infilling Hawaii's existing residential areas with Ohana zoning. And Ryan, you'll be interested to know that when Ohana zoning was first permitted in 1982, I was one of the first people to get that permit. And since then, I have rented to dozens and dozens of happy people and dozens of animals. They live within, say, 5-6 miles of their place of work, rather than having to commute from way out there. They get affordable housing, and I took a license out as a business. I have paid over $20,000 in GET taxes just for those rental properties. What a concept. What if we get Ohana zoning back? We infill the spaces, people have affordable housing, the city gets more tax revenue. Is that great, or is that great?
Yes, well,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going a little bit ahead of the conversation.
Oh, yes. Okay. Back up and tell us a bit about yourself. I got carried away with my thanks for that.
Yeah, well, this work that I do in revolutionizing architecture, you know, there's a real need for housing. It's one of man's 4 basic needs. We need air, cannot survive without air. We need clean water. We need food, and we need shelter to shelter us from the elements. And so along with the need for housing, there's a need for housing to be affordable and accessible. And we're not really, on the accessibility point and affordability, we're not really making it as a society. And that's evidenced by the large population of homeless that we have here in Hawaii. And I'm using that term homeless. I really don't like that term, because for me, when you say there's homeless people, it's almost like saying those people and then the rest of us. But we're one society. I like to believe we're one people. We're one people. We share this very small island. In our whole society, we're interconnected. So if we don't take care of that segment of our population, the people who do not have access to housing, it's costing, you know, there's a high cost for that.
Yeah, we just had to shut down that wonderful pond at the corner of Hotel and Bethel because the homeless were washing clothes, urinating, and so forth.
Right, and I felt that was really sad because that was a beautiful fountain, and that was a tribute when it was placed there many years ago. And the fact that it became a toilet and a washroom de facto. You cannot blame that on homeless people or people without access to the facilities. Bottom line is, in Chinatown, in downtown, and in town, period, we have a dearth of restrooms. There are not enough restrooms here in town for everyone to use. That's been an issue for a long time. When Macy's closed, we lost a public restroom. Macy's was a de facto public restroom for our island, and I see their slides that are coming up here. So the slide that was there with the tents. So there's, okay, let's talk about pyramids for a minute. I see the pyramid that's there. The pyramid is my symbol. Anybody that knows me, they know I'm into pyramids. Pyramids for me, they represent man at his zenith. So that the pyramid, we don't even know exactly what the purpose of the pyramid was. It's one of the oldest structures, built structures that we have here on Earth. We still don't even know what it's for, whether it's a tomb or some sort of a monument, astronomical monument, or there's even some people that say that it was some sort of a free energy type of a device. But the pyramid for me represents man at its zenith, and that's really important idea in Hawaii is Lau Lima, working together. We don't know exactly how the pyramids were built, but we know it took a lot of people working together to create these amazing structures that we have more than 5,000 years later. So going back to talking about our homeless population. So we have a population that are marginalized, and we call them homeless, but really any of us can be homeless. Any of us can fall on hard circumstances, and many do, because housing, it is very expensive, and there are a few reasons for that. And I understand it's expensive to buy the land. It's very expensive to construct, both in the materials and the labor that it takes to put a building together. And it's also very expensive, the energy and the resources that go into maintaining that building and sustaining that building over its life cycle, which could be anywhere from 40 to, many buildings in Europe and Asia are over 400 and 500 years old. It's still continuously inhabited. So, the need for housing is there. When I was preparing for this conversation, and I wanted to, look at housing and look at the problem here on the island, I was remembering back to when I was a child in school, and we learned about the Hoovervilles, which was in the 1930s after the Great Depression. People lived in these shanty towns. Almost every metropolitan area in the United States had one. And I remember looking at this as a child and saying, I couldn't imagine people living like that. You see that in places like Mexico, and you see that in third world countries. And I couldn't imagine seeing something like that here in our island. But we do. That was my chicken skin moment when I saw this picture and how eerie that is, how similar that is to a lot of the scene that we have here on the island, where people, they don't have anywhere else to go. They're living on the edges. They're living in tents. They're living in cars. There's a lot of hidden homeless who they might be sharing a couch. In my mini storage that I have here in town, you see a lot of people coming there. They're there every day. You would never know they were homeless, except all of their worldly goods, they're keeping it in a mini storage, and they're keeping themselves presentable. They're keeping, but they just don't have anywhere to go. And so the need for housing is there. And how do we address this need? We probably won't solve that issue now, but let's look at some revolutionary ways of creating this housing and providing this housing.
Yeah,
so
I've known many innovative people, but I think your ideas are probably more innovative, revolutionary than anybody.
well,
so
that
I'm
really
very
means a
eager.
lot
Yeah.
coming from you, Howard. I'm really honored that you would say that.
So can you give us some examples of the revolutionary ideas for housing? Yeah.
For one, you brought me here to talk about containers. International, they called ISO, International Standards Organization, for some years now, have standardized these great big metal boxes. They're anywhere from 20, well, they're usually either 20 feet long, 20 feet by 8 feet by 8 feet tall, or they're 40 feet by 8 feet by 8 foot tall. And this picture that we see right now is a container ship steaming into Oakland. Every day we have, well, there's about 65 million of these containers in global circulation. You know, when cargo became containerized, that really revolutionized the whole global trade. So no longer do we need a lot of labor, a lot of hand labor, unloading and reloading ships, but we've got a lot of machinery and robots doing it. And so we have 65 million of these containers now in circulation, and at some estimates there's approximately 700,000 of them sitting idle in American ports. Because we have a trade deficit with China, so we've got more of these containers coming in than we have flowing out. And so what do we do with these containers? Well, there are many people who are turning them into proper dwelling units. And so when I started looking into this, you know, in my opinion, the container itself, it's maybe a little too narrow and you know, to be usable, but there are people that are, you know, creating usable space. And what is really neat about these international standard shipping containers is they're very durable, and they can be made to stack, as we've seen the back of the ship that we were just looking at coming into Oakland Harbor. And that is exactly what companies and people are doing around the world, turning these containers into dwelling units.
Yeah, I was, some years ago, there was such a company out on Sand Island, and what they'd done is wired the container first for electrical outlets, and then insulated the holy heck out of it, carved windows, carved doors, and painted the exterior white to help reflect the sun's heat.
Yes.
And it was certainly not the Ritz, but by George, if you're out on the street, this container looks a whole heck of a lot better. You've got room for 2 people in there.
Well, so we have a very well-known development in Europe for student housing. It's in Amsterdam. It's called Kaetswonen.
Is that
it's
it?
student housing. No, that was a project that we're going to be coming to that. But this student residences in Europe, they actually have constructed these big residential blocks where they've stacked the containers, and they've got 4 or 5 blocks of approximately 40 houses or containers each. In each 40-foot container, it's a little apartment with proper cooking facility, bathing facility, and a common area and a sleeping area. So like a little micro flat or a micro apartment. We also have that type of construction. They're doing that type of work in France right now. There's a company called Tempo Housing that's doing that development. I read recently they're also going to be doing container student housing on the mainland in the United States. And I've actually also understand that they're doing a lot of the work to prefab the unit totally in China. So it's being shipped to Europe or to the mainland as a, you know, all they do is stack it and plug it into its main infrastructure, plumbing and water, the ingress and egress pathways, and they have a building already.
Okay, well, on that cheery note, we will take a short break and be back with Ryan Rutenschroer. I'm going to get this right one of these days. I've only known Ryan for 10 years or something like that. Be right back.
Okay.
Ted Ralston, folks, host of our show at ThinkTech Hawaii called Where the Road Leads, where we talk about technology influencing the future of Hawaii. Technology, of course, is the art of solving problems. We always bring in interesting and informed guests who can see from different perspectives and different points of view how that future might unfold and how technology can assist us in getting there. So once again, join us 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Fridays. Ted Ralston, your host. And please, if you have ideas that you'd like us to address on this show, or folks who you think should be on it, let us know.
Good afternoon again. Howard Wiig, Code Green, ThinkTech Hawaii. I am here with the certified building operator of Pacific Guardian Center, and we're talking about affordable housing. We have been talking about containers, and again,
Yes.
they have come to America. You're indicating that maybe they're going to be used on some American campuses. They have been used in Europe.
That's correct. Well, they're being used to create these communities of what they call micro flats, where the whole container is being utilized as one apartment. And what they do, since the container itself, it is it's a structural box. They can stack them up, they can line them up, and that becomes it's the unit. Both the dwelling unit and the structure in one fabrication.
Very, very affordable, and I know that a lot of UH students could certainly use affordable housing, and I imagine the same is true with every campus across America.
Yes, well, a lot of UH graduates can use affordable housing.
Yes. So that is one example of affordable housing. I know you have a whole lot more.
Yes. So one of the reasons that I'm here today is that I have been involved working with the container project here in Hawaii for the University of Hawaii, Honolulu Community College, where I take classes in construction management out at HCC. We were doing we were using one container to put together a duplex alternative house. So what that was it was going to have a separate dwelling unit on each side with a shared bathroom facility in the middle. And I was recently informed that that project is currently off the table, and one of the reasons being that they do not have a place to put it once we've actually fabricated the unit. So again, I don't know the future of this particular project, but I am aware of some innovative work that will be going on at the University of Hawaii School of Architecture at Manoa with Martin Despong, who is also one of your
he's a host
ThinkTech hosts. Yes. And so the future is, for these shipping containers, again, the idea of them being affordable, it's a very relative term. Affordability, I know these containers, just to buy the used unit, it's anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 for the actual container box itself. But putting in all of the infrastructure, the wiring, the plumbing, building it out to standard, actually renting the crane or truck to move it, all of those costs factor in. And again, it's the cost of land. Land is a big issue.
But as you indicated, we can stack them.
We can stack them,
partially
yes.
takes
and which is what they're doing in Europe, which
Yeah.
is what they're doing with the development in Amsterdam, Katevonen.
Okay, now you mentioned having a, well, first, that still sounds like a heck of a lot less money than it takes to build even a small single-family dwelling, a heck of a lot less.
Yes, well, the whole art is in the prefabrication. So where we're able to do the work in a factory under controlled settings. We can do it to very close tolerances because they're standardized. We know when we get them to the site what exactly their dimensions are. They can fit very nicely together. You don't have that when you're doing one-off site-built structures. So that's where, when you're talking about prefab, that again, it's a very revolutionary way of building, but it's nothing new. We've seen this before. This idea of prefabricated buildings. We have that mobile homes on the mainland. Those are prefabricated buildings. Kit homes. You could buy homes from the Sears catalog.
Yeah, you could
time.
way back when. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Now, you also mentioned a truck. These can be transported on trucks naturally. That's their nature. And another one of your interests is transportable housing. Is this what you have in mind for transportable housing, or?
Yes, actually, it's well, transportable housing can either be where you're actually moving the whole house. But let's face it, to move to put in a house and to move a whole house is a lot of work. So that may be moving the containers from place to place like you would a trailer or a mobile home. Maybe that's not the that's not the answer for everybody. But another thought that I have on transportability is, because we are nomadic people now, that why not take your whole house with you? Why should I not be able to own my dwelling unit and be able to disassemble it in one location and reassemble it in another location? So that's another facet of the work that I do in transportability. So my background, my educational background before I got into building operations, is I'm a graduate of the yacht design and fabrication program on Sand Island. I'm one of the very small handful of students that came through the Marine Education Training Center, got to work hands-on in fiberglass boat building and maintenance. I actually got to work on the Hokulea and dry dock and Hawaii Loa, and I got to work on the mold for the latest generation of sailing canoes for UH Hilo. So this idea that we can actually build a mold and we can stamp out large structures and be able to transport it where we need it. Another type of transportable housing is the nomadic tent, like we have in parts of Africa. And well, that's what we have de facto now with a lot of homeless people. We have people living in fabric structures. So why not actually, look at this way of building where it's a kit of parts, can be taken apart, disassembled, reassembled, at the same time making it work within our existing society and in our framework. So we don't have those people and the rest of us, but housing for all of us.
Just to go back to containers for a minute, what occurred to me as we were talking was there's talk of establishing housing on Sand Island for the homeless. Why not have a rectangular or square community of stacked containers around a common area, and in the common area are restrooms and even shelters for congregating and shelters for cooking.
Yes, and that's exactly the idea of, like, we see these large communities. Cape Vonen in the Netherlands is very close to the harbor area, and so it really blends in with it. It would look just like the rest of Sand Island, which is really that's our front door. That's where we receive goods. Coming in and leaving the island is there. My idea on the shared communal facilities is that only works up until a point, but I really believe that to have a proper dwelling, people need their privacy, and so where we have the shared infrastructure, it needs to be, well, even the thing with the proper restrooms here in town, why not have it be attended restrooms like we have in Europe? We have people that attend the restroom, and we usually tip them. And the restroom, public restroom, they're usually very nice.
Yeah.
We need that in our community.
And Buckminster Fuller.
Yes.
You and I are both huge fans of Bucky Fuller. Yeah.
So this idea of creating a factory-built house, that is not a new idea. So in the 1940s, after World War II, the architect Buckminster Fuller, he had tooled up a factory to produce a house that he called the Dymaxion house. You can see a prototype in the Dearborn Museum, in Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan.
Is this the?
That is it, yes.
That's the Dymaxion
so
house.
His Dymaxion house, it's very interesting because his idea was he's using the materials in tension, so he has a mast that he's creating, and this whole structure itself is suspended from that one central point. So they're inside of the structure itself are guy wires that hold the building up, and so anybody that understands material science, they know steel is very strong in tension, and so really having something be suspended from tension cables, that's really the best way to use steel. And we see this real beautiful polished aluminum surface. That comes from this idea that Buckminster Fuller wanted to take the industry that we had here in America, which was building a lot of planes for the war effort, and he wanted to keep that going to create housing because we had a real need for housing at that time. Very scary. It almost parallels our time in that we've got a lot of returning servicemen and women that need housing. And again, going back to the need for housing, that's another reason why I don't like to say, those homeless people and we marginalize them, but really when you look at that population, it's a lot of elderly people, it's a lot of children, disproportionately elderly and children and veterans, and they don't deserve that. So even within, say, people who are without shelter, there's a number of reasons why they may have fallen on those circumstances, and that's not to say, there's healthy, there's a lot of mental illness too. And again, if you go into this marginalization, so you've lost your house, then and you're homeless, so you don't have the resources, you don't have your shelter, or that can lead to more mental illness. So how we're dealing with housing right now, it really does have to change. So this idea that we can create housing and we can deploy it where it's needed, well, we've seen that even since 2005. We had Hurricane Katrina, and we had our government was attempting to and did house a lot of people in trailer homes, recreational vehicles, which again, that's a prefabricated structure, transportable architecture. But then we saw the problem with that was the materials that they were using, like inside a new car, you've got a lot of what is called VOCs, which are unhealthy chemicals. So that's another challenge for us. If we're building something in a factory, how do we make it so that it is a habitable structure? So even what we're using to build out that unit, that's another facet of the research that I do.
And finally, you spoke of health. One of your many passions is architecture for healing.
Yes, architecture for healing. That is my philosophy. That is my life's work, architecture for healing. And what that is are structures that are environmentally conscious. So structure like the LEED program. I'm involved with the U.S. Green Building Council. They have created this leadership in energy and environmental design. A lot of the audience may have seen plaques or heard of it, but it's a rating system that you use. It's guidelines that you use in building your structure. We have another rating system or way of building what they call living buildings, which are very environmentally, building in a way that's so environmentally conscious that you're actually regenerating the land. By the building being there, it's actually a net positive for the land. So architecture for healing is environmentally conscious. It's also multicultural. I have a slide in there. It's in Germany, in a town called Marburg, where we have this ancient Fachwerk house type of building, half-timbered structures, and we have the solar panels, photovoltaic panels on the top. So, the idea of the container itself is this metal box, void metal box, but it's very important in the buildings that we create. It's got to have a sense of the place that we're building it at.
Yeah,
so,
that looks very German. So,
yes, yes, that's in a university city, and very important city in Germany, and again in our community in Honolulu, we would want to look at buildings that really embrace this idea of Hawaiiana, and what does that mean? Is we've got different eras that and communities that we live in, so these houses that blend with the culture of the environment. So architecture for healing is multicultural, multifunctional, structures that can serve more than one purpose. So a structure that can be both used in a residential manner and also as industrial use or commercial use. I have a slide in there.
Well, we need to take a short break first, and then we will get to what is the slide we're going to bring up?
That's going to be the Freitag store in Zurich.
Freitag store, Zurich. Okay.
Yes.
On that cheery note, Howard Wiig, Code Green, will be back in less than 1 minute.
Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Good afternoon again. Howard Wiig, Code Green. I have Mr. Ryan Rutenschrouer. One of these days I'm going to get it right. We have only a limited amount of time left, and we got a lot of ground to cover. We're in the midst of architecture for healing, and you're pointing to Germany as an example of bringing this idea to fruition.
Well, my other picture I would have used there would have been the Korean Center at UH Manoa. I really love that building. Another passion of mine is I really I appreciate Japanese architecture. I've learned a lot from the architecture of Japan. Architecture for healing is really rooted in a lot of Japanese philosophy. This idea that we've standardized our spaces, how we can fit spaces together, so it's very harmonious. So this picture, this slide that we're looking at now, is just showing this beautiful space. Tatami mats. Tatami are standardized. It's a standardized floor system. So is usually 3 feet by 6 feet. There's a couple different standards, but the most commonly used one is the 3. In our dimensions is 3 feet by 6 feet. Is the space that is considered appropriate for one person to lie down, or 2 people to sit. And in Japanese architecture, architects, they're usually the master craftsmen, or traditionally were master craftsmen And the people would not order their house, say, based on square footage, but they would order their house on the number of tatami mats that they could afford or that they needed. So multicultural, architecture for healing, multi-use. We were going to look at that stacked containers, the Freitag store in Zurich. That is where they've taken these containers and they've stacked them up. It's in a spectacularly tall tower.
Look at that. I don't know that I'd want to be on the top of that
Freitag store. This is actually seismically rated because this is in the Alps, and Zurich is actually a seismic area. And so that Freitag store is considered like the Zappos. It's a trendy department store. It's like Zappos for Switzerland.
And that was a department store?
Yes, yes. So the stacked containers are providing both retail space and storage space. And the very top unit is an observation deck.
And there's an interior elevator going through?
Oh, I could imagine. I haven't been
wow.
there before, but I would like to go. But this idea of one of your building block, like Legos, you can make anything. Can make a castle, can make a car. So multi-use, so multifunctional, so transportable. So architecture for healing is also transportable, which we're covering in this dialogue. But for our last few minutes, I want to talk about the spiritual nature.
Sure.
So spirituality in terms of, we talked about the need for a proper restroom. The restroom being a sacred space. When humans go to the bathroom, that's a very vulnerable position, and we need to be safe. We need to be safe when we're, so I really advocate for good restrooms. Places to both prepare food and to share foods. And so again, talking about these communal spaces, if we can manage the communal spaces so everybody has a chance to use them properly, in my experience, where you're sharing a kitchen or a bathroom, it only takes one person to mess it up for everybody, and it's not pleasant anymore. So that is why I'm advocating for these dwelling units to have their own facilities, so there is privacy and there's dignity in that. But also spiritual in the sense of dimensions that we use, harmonious dimensions. So I've done a lot of research for architecture for healing. I have a big appreciation for the work of Le Corbusier, who is a French architect. He came up with a system of measurements called le modular. It's based on the golden ratio of harmonious proportions, which is very ancient, ancient. And this is Le Corbusier's modular. It's demonstrating dimensions that he would use in a kitchen design. So he's translating it over. Le Corbusier has a whole block. Well, he did several residential blocks, but his most famous that he's done using this system of dimensioning is Habité d'Habitation in the city of Marseille in the south of France. But he's done, and he also did one of these residential blocks in Berlin, and it's, he's, this idea, Le Corbusier is very well known because he felt that a building should be a machine for living. Right before Buckminster Fuller, this industrial age is coming forward, and we're using our factories, and so in the same precision and skill that we're manufacturing airplanes and automobiles and trains and ships, why not our housing that we need and that we use? And so all of this ideas is what I have pulled together, and I continue to research in my philosophy of architecture for healing.
Now, if Corbusier is designing very precisely, wouldn't that lend itself to being comfortable in smaller spaces? Because you're going down to the last inch.
Yes.
For uses, yeah.
Yes, and so that, again, this is a frontier. This is our human frontier. that we're on right now is how are we providing proper housing and housing that we need, that we all need, and how are we bringing it to a level where everybody has access to it. And that is work that I'm very happy to do here at this time in life, in this location in our beautiful islands of Hawaii, where there's really the need that is there. And also we've got a lot of innovative people here that are doing work in this area. And so I'm very happy to be here today and discuss this topic with you.
Okay, on that cheery note, we just are getting warmed up. Ryan, let's have you back in a few months and develop these ideas further.
Indeed, I'd be honored to.
Thank you. So, Howard Wiig, Code Green, ThinkTech Hawaii. See you in 2 weeks.